more popular than we are in the room based on our French speaking skills from Center for Multiparty Democracy. I think I'll give her the opportunity to introduce herself more better. And the second one will be Diana Kasakal from Speak Up Africa. And I believe the session was to be moderated by Brian Githinji. I understand we have a couple of Brians inside, so...
topic is about strengthening the rule of law. It's very simple. We start by understanding, first of all, what is the rule of law? Standing from the perspective of your work, could you sum up that in Kenya, do we have equality under the law? In a scale of 1 to 10, do we have it? And if it's yes, around 8, could you describe it? If it's no, what are the challenges?
All right, so asante sana, Brian, for that question. I think we got introduced. So my name is Nthenya. I work for the Center for Multiparty Democracy as a project officer under the youth docket. So we work with young people mainly within our political parties to ensure that we are giving them the platforms that they need or they require to either advocate for issues that affect them, or at the same time also take part in formulation of policies on issues that are of interest to them. But over and above that, well, CMD does a whole lot of other things. We won't go into that.
How many are with us? That's nice. At least I know that we are continuing in one voice. So back to your response, Madam Nthenya.
All right, so you asked about what CMD does with regards to working with young people. So we are a political parties membership-based organization. So mainly what that means is we work with political parties that have representation in both the National Assembly and the county assemblies. So, and with this regard, they're elected members or even nominated members. So through part of our programs, rather some of our programs entail youth development. And for the youth development programs, we capacity build youths. I know we've overused this word a lot, or this term a lot in this, in this workshop. But by capacity building the youths, we not just inform them, we offer civic education opportunities for them. We offer platforms for them to, interact with their leaders through whether it's intergenerational dialogue platforms, town halls, public lectures. But over and above that, we also have policy dialogue forums that we also run as an organization. Our biggest dialogue platform, of course, I know most people here are aware of the People Dialogue Festival. And this particular one happens annually, giving a platform where different stakeholders can come into dialogue with each other. But over and above that, we are also acknowledging, rather we acknowledge the fact that 4 days are not enough for dialogue. So part of what we do is now devolving the PDF affair into the different counties that we are operational in. What are some of the challenges in that space? And with regards to also ensuring that the youth are stepping up to these spaces to participate, and not just to participate, but to also contribute to discussions or conversations that are of public interest. Challenges there include limited, I know we can't say it's limited access to information because, well, Matters Constitution and the Constitution itself is actually available online. But then again, the accessibility of that particular tool might not be as accessible for someone who's in Mashinani compared to people in Nairobi. Again, might be actually a problem of the messaging. Are we reaching out to these young people as we ought to, whether we are giving them civic education and empowering them on, rather giving them information on what it is that's afforded them in the Constitution. Are we structuring it in ways that are appealing to them? Are we using the avenues that they would, be on a kawaida basis, for lack of a better term, be using in that sense? I mean, among other challenges, including, access to some of these platforms where public participation takes place, and especially within Mashinani.
Thank you very much. And building upon the point that you mentioned, one of the challenges is access to information. And I remember one time that when I was arrested by the City Council Inspectorate, whom we call Kanjos, my friends from outside the country may not know, but it's a very, very traumatizing experience. I came to learn that in as much as bylaws number 8, the bylaws that we have in the county allow for the arrest, but our national constitution and the High Court ruled that they do not have the power to arrest. So how can young people find this information? And I'm going to build up to what Speak Up Africa does in making this information accessible online. So yes, we have the information accessible online, but what other challenges? What are some of these mechanisms that you as a person in the organization are working in order for young people who have smartphones like us, sometimes even better phones than the older people, can access this information?
Hi everyone. So to answer your question, I think we're compared to our parents, we are the generation that's mostly on the digital spaces. But then also compared to our parents, we're the generation that's barely noticing changes politically. So I think to that, we're trying to also adapt to what most youths prefer, and also trying to bring in, I feel like there's so many youths who know who Aziad is than what they know that the bill is being passed in parliament is. So now you see some of us are trying to advocate for this by now putting people like the youths follow to advocate for such instances, and also to write a lot and post a lot on the internet concerning this type of discussions. But then the challenge comes in with the intake, because you find it's quite easy for someone to swipe against a conversation that has to do with politics and improvement in the political spaces, compared to someone passing on someone doing like what the ordinance. You understand? Like it's quite easy. So that's the challenge. I feel like the biggest challenge also, I would say, comes also from the backgrounds that we've grown up in. We're so used to the idea that, okay, for parliamentary spaces or political spaces are for the grown. Yes, they're for the grown. And even you can see perhaps a youth leader. You don't see so many representatives of like youth leaders even in parliament or even in places of office. You understand? So it makes people feel like, okay, this is not even my space. We just guarantee it as like, that's old people stuff. Forgetting we'll get old. Yeah? So then I think that's one of the biggest problems. And also the fact that the elder generation hasn't created a space for the younger generation to take in this stuff, because you undermine them, they get undermined, they feel like, okay, our perception or our ideas they don't hold any water. So then it makes the younger generation be like, I'll deal with it when I get older. You understand? So even the taxation, someone's like, I don't care, yet you're forgetting that the older generation weren't taxed for their cars, and then us, we're about to get taxed with the small money that we have. So I think that's the biggest challenge, the fact that there's no space for the older generation to like allow the younger generation to like come in and advocate for what they believe in. They have very strong values and very strong points of what they believe in. I think even the young generation, specifically Gen Z, they are changing even the workspaces. I saw a tweet the other day and someone was saying, Gen Z can't even wait. They can't even wait for even 2 days for their salary to be late. And someone wrote there and was like, you people advocate for nonsense. Why would I wait for 2 days for my salary to be late? You understand? So yeah, I feel like they need to create spaces for younger people and for the older generation to like ease their way in.
Yeah. So speaking of Twitter, because I use Instagram, if you go look at my Instagram page, you will not believe that I am a hustler, because the photos are well good. And one thing that we have seen people being arrested just because of posting a tweet, demanding action or demanding accountability. And it's a very big problem, not just in Kenya, even in Zambia. Last week, there was an incident where 4 people were arrested because they posted a tweet like, we don't support President Hakainde Hichilema's policies. So if this comes along, if these challenges are there, what alternatives can young people like I use? What are some of these remedies that I, as a young person, can seek when I am under such threats?
I think that's a very interesting question, Brian. And I say that because one, and you'll bear me witness, even in Kenya itself, the social media space at the moment sort of seems to have more power over you following the kawaida, legal frameworks or legal, outlines that we have, right? So that you can have someone that has broken the law being followed up on just because we've made noise on Twitter, or X now, or Facebook or whatever other avenue, much more than, so I can say the social media space in itself, we can actually use that as one of the tools that we can leverage on to ensure that we are reaching out as the young people for justice, because you'll also bear me witness that going through the court process itself, it's quite costly, and especially for young people. Again, it's time consuming. Trust me, there's no way you're investing that amount of time. Some cases actually last for up to years or decades, Are you waiting that long to be served your justice, while you have the option of using the social media to get a quicker attention to whatever it is that you feel needs to be addressed. So I'd say social media.
In response to that, I think for Kenyans, I think it works. Because I remember there was a time, I don't know if it was, I think it was in Nairobi, along the towns, I think you see there's those canvases, not canvases, but those idols where they portray them in town. And there was like a very funny looking lion. I don't know who was the governor at the time, but it was a rant in Kenya. And that's why there's KOX, or before it was KOT. I think it works. Unfortunately, that sometimes you also get caught up in it, but it works. You see Moses Kuria, the trade issue, you see he went on national television saying, oh, the oil is, it's not the right price. And you see, people are like, no, you're lying. It's actually appreciated. It hasn't depreciated. So I think for us Kenyans, it works because it helps us call out our leaders without being traced outrightly. Because I think most of Kenyans are afraid of like speaking out and then just not being backed up by everyone else. So at least in KOX, you can just go there and rant. Although, there's a very thin line between ranting and cyberbullying, but then I guess it works for us. It works for us in so many other ways. I think for other countries, perhaps like Uganda and Tanzania, it's not as free. But I think in Kenya, it works for us, and we try our level best to call out our leaders through these spaces. And at least, clearly Kenyan leaders, you have to shame them for them to work. So if we have to shame some of them, we are going to have to. Even the thing that happened in Trans Nzoia, those students lost their money. And no one was going to follow up on that. But unfortunately, when this lady came over and she said, may I have a degree? I've been to school. I sell porridge, and then you come and take my money. Now the justice system it intervened. The president was like, okay, call these people. We need to understand what's happening. So for us, it's working. I would advocate for everyone to tweet. Just don't cyberbully, but yeah.
Yeah, and remember we have a Computer Misuse and Cybercrimes Act in 2018 that was assented into law by President Kenyatta at the time. So whatever you tweet may have consequences. But I'm going to ask a question to the audience. How many of you think that we have strong institutions? And by institutions, I don't mean universities. I mean parliament, judiciary, and the executive. How many think? How many don't think? How many don't know what even institutions we have in our country? Because that could also be. Okay, so we know from the last report from the Mo Ibrahim Foundation, they say that Kenya is actually growing in our rule of law indicators. However, when we hear the president, for example, when we see the president meeting the Chief Justice, I become worried, will I ever win a case against the executive in court? When we see parliamentarians being told by the president that they have to go and tanga, I become scared, will my petitions be accepted? So as a young person who's looking from the outside, and I see all this is happening, what other mechanisms, how can I leverage political parties, for example? How can I leverage other forums in order for me to access justice? Because all our goal today is building democracy, isn't it? Yes.
All right, thank you for that, Brian. So, one, it's true that the executive, as we've come to see, is actually it interferes a lot with the judiciary. And it's been a problem, not just for the present, government, might be a bit, limited in the present government or even the previous one. But then again, that's been a trend for quite a while. I think in Moi's era and the regime before that, that was pretty prevalent. But then in our present day, even as we try to move away from, that sort of interference, or even trying to find our ways around it, I think one of the things that we are also trying to boost as a way of conflict resolution is dialogue itself. So one of the things that we believe as CMD Kenya is that conflict resolution doesn't necessarily mean or have to end up in a violent place. Yes, we agree that we have a law that actually allows us, it's our right to picket, to do all these things, but at the same time, it's also equally possible for us to sit on a level platform, come to agreements, build consensus on issues that we feel are affecting us, and that's one of the things that, young people can actually employ. What are we doing in that space? I think for CMD, we are huge on providing these dialogue spaces, whether it's the town halls where, the led and the leaders can sit together and, come up with things that are working for their communities or societies. Again, providing now the PDF itself, but over and above that, we do a lot of advocacy work, whether we are lobbying, the different, even before NADCO came into place, I remember we were already in that, we were already putting in place some of the things that yielded or bore more fruit when NADCO now was convened. We were already in that space, advocating for different things that we thought or felt needed to be addressed at that particular point in time and post the 2022 elections. Over and above that, we've also been great advocates for other things, maybe like gender equality and all that. So providing these spaces within even our political parties where we can convene young people and their leaders to ensure that, one, their voices are being heard in those spaces, but then again, that their perceptions are also being considered in decision-making and policies.
Yes, so we've been advised we should join political parties. I'm now turning to you, Diana. I'm asking from the point, I am a young person, I've been arrested, I'm in the cell, I'm using the bucket, my maragwe, ugali yenye haijaiva, I am eating it. I am being told my case is next week in court, but I don't have a lawyer. I know there's always a statement of pro bono lawyers, but then these are not accessible outside of Nairobi, and we know Kenya doesn't rotate around Nairobi, fortunately. So what are some of these legal remedies that young people in such a situation can utilize for them to gain access to justice?
I think in Kenya there's some legal free organizations, legal aid organizations that can help you, like battle your cases perhaps in court, in case you do not have the right representation, or you're not very aware of what's happening, or you haven't even, okay, for instance, you mentioned about arrest. I've never been arrested, so my first instinct would be to look for a lawyer, but then there's also practically legal aid, like NGOs that provide legal aid or opportunities for people who do not have access or do not have the right opportunities, or even do not have the right information of how to go about it.
Yes, very succinct. So back to you, Nthenya, and my question is going to come from, in Kenya, we have a very bad culture where people never accept election results. We've had some leaders, they've been vying since before I was born, now still they're vying. Some of us may die and leave them vying again and again, and they never accept election results. And not only on the national side, also on the county, also in universities as well. So building on this culture of people not accepting and moving on, what are some of these alternative dispute mechanisms can we utilize? You spoke about dialogues very well, but outside of dialogues, what are some of these frameworks that people can utilize at their own local communities, like the project we had from the young man from Kisumu in the morning? What are some of these things they can do in order to build a culture huku chini ya ku-accept? Once the people at the bottom accept, even you at the top, if you don't, we are not going to protest.
That's very interesting, again. But the Kenyan Constitution, let's begin from there. It actually provides for, dispute resolution mechanisms, and especially electoral disputes. So then we have the it's called what? The PPDT. PPDT, rather the dispute tribunal is the word, yeah. So the dispute tribunal can actually take care of pretty much every other electoral dispute. At that level, I'm not quite sure whether it's established at the local levels, because I know most of these offices will either operate as at the national level, rather they'll have national offices and maybe regional offices as well. Some like IEBC, I know they have the county offices, like they have, the privilege of having county offices. But beyond that, I'm not quite sure whether PPDT has presence at the local levels. But over and above that, if we were to use alternative mechanisms to maybe just come to an agreement or foster that sort of agreement, that would be a very tricky space, one, but we can do our own local advocacy. I think you've also mentioned that there are organizations that are working with young people to ensure that they are not, radicalized is not the word, they're not involved that much in, political upheavals, or whenever there is, that sort of disagreement as to who won and who did not. They're not involved in those scaffolds. But as communities, one of the ways that we can do that is through our CBOs. There are actually community-based organizations that are good at working with young people to either empower them with civic education or the civic know-how to know that, hey, this is where you draw the line. But then again, Kenyan elections are also very tricky in that, one, we fix most of the political parties, and unfortunately, they fix that leader or political party leader image in every other bit of the political, party operations. So that if this particular leader is who we are backing for elections, we do not have that objectivity of agreeing that it can never be wrong. It's a cultural issue. Of course, we ought to do a lot. There's a lot that needs to be done in that space to make sure that people are moving away from that identifying political parties with a particular person, as opposed to having, issue-based politics or political parties that are ideology-based.
Sasa, again to the audience, how many of you have heard of the Bill of Rights, Chapter 4 of our Constitution? Do you know that in our Bill of Rights, I think should be Section 25, the right to fair trial is a right that cannot be limited under any circumstance? I don't know if any person knew that. Based on that factor, if we are young people, we are building civil societies at the grassroots level. We have CBOs, we have projects. Obviously, we need money. No one is going to give us that money. We accept it because we've been asking for it for a lot of time. So my question would become, what are some of these strategies to build partnerships we can do? And by partnerships, looking at multi-sectoral partnerships, collaborating even with the police, with the local administration, because they have facilities down at the grassroots level. What are some of these strategies that we can implement? Because we have to substitute the money part. No one is giving us the money, but we need to do this civic education, because this civic education is very crucial to strengthening the rule of law. I think we can start with you, Madam Diana.
Sorry, do you mind repeating the question?
Oh, you have
No, I got it, but then there was a lot of in between. Yeah, just the question.
So basically, we are looking at what are some of these strategies that young people at the grassroots level can utilize to build partnerships as an alternative for them to accessing money, because no one wants to give us money, or probably you can, but no one wants to give us money. So what are some of these things that we can do in order to substitute that?
Okay. First and foremost, I can't give you money, I'm broke. And then I think for that, I'd give an example of like the initiative that Eric Omondi has, Sisi kwa Sisi. I think that one has been a practical example of like how the youths can come together and get money together to help other people by basically just mobilizing the youths, and also accountability. Because I feel like that's the biggest problem when it comes to money in Kenya. There's almost 0 to nil transparency. So the issue of people handing out funds and giving out money comes down to the fact that people are scared of like handing out money and then it ends up in someone's pockets, which is quite a normal habit in Kenya. So I think if we can create avenues for transparency, and also basically, it's non-profitable. You understand? If it's non-profitable, then people can understand this is just basically the essence of trying to grow something and to make it, you're trying to nurture something so that it can help someone else in the long run. I think as Kenyans, the only patriotism I've seen in us the most is having these wristbands. I think that's the biggest. If anyone asks me, I'll be like, oh, why are you Kenyan? Like, prove something to prove that you're Kenyan. Every one of us has a wristband. I think it's a thing in Kenya, and it's something we're really all proud of. But then that is the farthest that our patriotism extends to. It doesn't extend to like helping one another. It doesn't extend to like, trying for a leader to even get into power and be like, okay, Sawa, me, I'm from this area. I will just build a basic road. I will just help improve the infrastructure. So then that's where the problem comes. People are so, when someone gets into power, I'm trying to find the right word for finyilia. Like they suppress you to an extent where someone else, like when someone now fights to the point where they get into power, now they want to suppress the rest because they're feeling like I was also suppressed. So all of you are going to feel the wrath of my suppression. You understand? So I think we need to be a bit more patriotic. I think that's what we lack. We lack patriotism. And if we have that, away from just having a wristband from Kenya, then I think we can help one another. Because the Sisi kwa Sisi movement has shown that as youths, we can come together and mobilize without the government and raise funds without anyone's input. I see people raising money on TikTok for just being on a live and just saying, oh, tap, 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 tap. And then someone leaves there with 100,000. You understand? So that means we can do it. Yeah, I see it all the time. And I guess that's why the government is trying to tax content creators, because people walk away with over 500,000 because of just sitting on a screen. And I don't fault them. I would do it if I could. If I could just go there and sit on a screen and do it, I would. But then, you see, we have the money. We can extend our hands and provide for things that matter. We just need a lot of transparency. And also, I think we also need to also have a certain respect and believe in things that matter, because I'm not trying to downgrade content creators, but then I see like people advocating and like contributing to things that I would not say nonsensical or non-essential, but things that don't hold much weight or don't carry much weight. Yeah, like I think the Let Brian Chira, a lot of people raised money for him, right? A lot of Kenyans raised. I think it caused like a nationwide like stop, because the boy was just like an ordinary kid. And at the same time, there was a lady, I think she was a journalist who had died, and she had been a veteran for a very long time. Unfortunately, this boy's demise, it just overpowered a veteran's. He was just a young kid. So you understand, like we have the potential, and it was because of what they used. I feel like my mom was even asking me, who's this Brian Chira guy? And I'm like, if you don't know him, I can't explain past that. I honestly can't explain. And she knew the veteran, but she's like, who's this small boy? You see, so the youth, we have the power, we have the initiative. I even feel like we have even the money. Because, with our parents' age, they have the money, but then it's so misplaced. But then with us, with the youths, we don't need too much reason for it. We just feel like, in Kenyans would say, if the vibe is there, then we contribute. Do you understand? So I think we can raise funds. Sisi kwa Sisi is an initiative that works. TikTok is an initiative that works clearly. So yeah, we can raise the funds without the government coming in, or even without like an NGO, an unprofitable organization.
Wow, young people have money.
I agree, they do. It's only that priorities are kind of different. But one of the other ways that I could also advocate for is networking. One, get to know some of these organizations that you're working or rather interacting with. What do they do? What are some of the areas that you can synergize on? So that if you have an activity that can actually speak to one of their objectives or some of the projects that they have, then you can partner with that or on that. Again, most of those organizations, I know they do not have presence at the grassroots. So they depend on community-based organizations to get their initiatives into those, or rather get the interventions into those spaces. So know your people, network, and then attend even activities like this. Get to know who's in which organization, what do they do? Do they have any programs there that could be of benefit maybe to your organization or the things that you try to run? Over and above that, speak up about your course as well. The more you talk about it, the more people buy, and then act on it, the more people buy into it. And then the funds will come.
So attend as many conferences as much as you can. Network, at least know 4 or 5 people before you leave the room. My last question probably would be like this. We know the theme, you can't have rule of law, you can't have democracy without equality. And we are so grateful that the Youth Cafe has been able to bring persons with disabilities, a high number of women. We have an all or 2 women and 1 man panel. Yeah, so my question would be, Kenya, we are still far from getting to the point where we have equality under the law. And I'm looking at it from a perspective of a young woman who wants to access justice, who wants to participate in political and governance processes. What advice would you give to that person, both of you?
Do you want to go first? All right. So what advice would I give to a young woman who's trying to access justice within the different avenues that we have? That's the question, right? Okay, so one, it's been for the longest time, and I'm not trying to play victim over here, but our society for the longest time has really favored, the male gender over the women. In as much as we've done a whole lot to make sure that, we're achieving the 2/3 gender principle, which came up in 2010, I think, which we started implementing in 2010, a lot still needs to be done in that space, obviously. But then again, the scales are still tipped, and in favor of men over women, owing to cultural, norms, or even, even economic empowerment, or even economic prowess, whether people are well empowered economically, it always tips, the scale always tips in a particular direction, it's skewed in favor of men. So then what can we do as young women in that space to ensure that we are, one, accessing justice? I'll go with using the organizations that offer that, or rather offer avenues into justice, maybe for people who would not be in a position to access that, using, or rather would not have the resources to access justice. Talk of organizations like FIDA, you can go through that. Rather, we can go through that as young women. But also, again, I'll fall back on social media. I'll fall back on social media as one of the hugest or biggest tools that we have to use in some of these spaces. But then again, belong somewhere. When you belong somewhere, you have, and somewhere I mean a political party, you have better avenues to get your cause championed in those spaces. All right, thanks. So belong somewhere. Once you belong in a political party, you have better avenues of championing your cause, 1. 2, you have better avenues of accessing that justice through their systems or party systems. I may not know much of the different parties or what they have within their systems to ensure that there's justice in that space. It's quite a lot to cram or get conversant with, I have to say. But then again, the Constitution itself also provides for avenues through which we can access that. 1, and in as much as we have a bit of a disconnect there where there is apathy with regards to, that these systems exist, but then again, you do not have trust in these systems, so then you'd rather keep off altogether because you do not know whether if you employ this particular avenue, whether it's going to yield you any form of results or favorable results for that matter. But then again, are we also aware of some of these things that we can actually use in those spaces? Whether it's within the Constitution or whether it's within the different organizations that offer those justice services or legal services, are we also aware of that? So I'd say make yourself aware as well. But then again, belong somewhere. That's your hugest or our hugest, our biggest, I think, our biggest avenue to getting access.
I think Nthenya has said most of them, so I'll just mention but a few. I think for the most part, I think we also need to educate our men, because I think just recently we had an issue with femicide in Kenya, It's just that it's not being talked about now, but we still have an issue with femicide. It's quite common to, like you can check in the last, I don't know how many months, someone was, like the last 3 months, you see a lady was shot somewhere, a lady, apparently the other lady, the Ohangla singer, her husband like slit her throat. Then the other, you understand, like, so I feel like there is a lot of, I don't want to call it toxic masculinity, in Kenya with our men. I don't want to get bashed by the men from Kenya. I love our men from Kenya, not all, but some. But yeah, I think we have a lot of toxic masculinity. I sit in spaces, and I hear perhaps men having a conversation, and they, you hear them saying like, a woman shouldn't do that, as a man. And I feel like, how about we start thinking as a human being rather than just as a man or as a woman? You have people around you or beside you who you're relatively like, very close to, who are also females. So I think we should just be like each other's keepers, because in as much as we want to protect the women and, give them a, like, as whatever, a spearhead in some of these things, I feel like the conversations need to be had with some of our companions. But then also, I don't think it's only for the men. I think also the world is very harsh around men. So I feel like they feel the need to have someone under them to be a bit harsher. Yeah, like, hey, the world's already harsh on me. You reason with men sometimes, and someone tells you, you're a woman. You're okay. You're a woman. You could get a job. And I'm like, no, but I'm suffering. Like, yeah, they're like, no, you could get a job. You're a woman. Someone could listen to you. So I feel like if we could also stop being too harsh, it's actually, if you didn't know, it's actually in June. It's actually mental awareness for men. Yes. So if we want the woman to be safe and whatever, we need to acknowledge the men and feel like they're also important and that they add value. They're just not like donkeys who need to work their asses off. Yes. But also, I feel like for me, I think it's more of psychological. I know there's studies, I know there's systems where women can go and do this, but I feel like most of the issues when it comes to men and women, it's a bit more psychological than the systems. So yeah, I think we should start from that point.
Yeah. But you know what else is happening in June?
What?
Pride Month.
Yay!
So I'm going to pick questions from the audience, at least 3 before we get to lunch. I'll start with you, Mr. Wangwa.
So we go, like you mentioned, 3 brief questions. I hope you all were hearing the presentation yesterday on mental health. So can I finally follow the gentleman over there?
Okay, thank you so much. That's a very nice and informative session. When the session began, you started with the question whether some of us have been arrested. There are some jobs that when you do, getting arrested is part of that job. So yes, there are some jobs that when you do, especially things to do with human rights, getting arrested is part of it. And it's very, very obvious. Some of the things we hear from the police officers who arrest us, they normally quote this scripture, and I'll read it, Matthew 5:25, that when you are on the way to the court with your adversary, settle your difference quickly. Otherwise, your accuser may hand you over to the judge, who will hand you over to the officer, and you'll be thrown in prison. So is that a helpful way of helping us not to get to prison, or is it a manipulatory tactic for them to get a token or some cash from us? That's my question. It's directed to any of the panelists.
Thank you. So where did you have the next question? As young people can raise your hand. We've been told to go and learn our laws. Who has the next question? We want to take all the questions and then give them to respond kindly.
Thank you very much and good afternoon. Sorry I was a bit late today. Great panel and great interview right there. As we talk about, by the way, I'm a beneficiary of both the entities. So thank you for the good job you're doing. We are talking about justice, and I was just concerned to start with. We've been enrolled to iVoting, and there was something, as you register, there was something to do with terms and conditions. How many of us clicked the terms, not the ones that were displayed? How many of us pressed the terms and conditions? Na usidanganye. Sasa so you can see only 1 or 2. So if you are taken to court yesterday na unasema, I did not subscribe but the terms and conditions are there. You have allowed, maybe you have allowed them to use your photo, to use your details, but we are crying about justice. So perhaps I wanted maybe you to enlighten us, just a little bit of more being cautious with the social, what are they called? Hii mitandao and whatever, how to be just be a bit cautious, how to protect our data. It is in line with justice. And about political parties, finally, you know, I'm a politician and politicians never lose. And sometimes the only way to keep your supporters guessing, psyched up, is to tell them, kiliibiwa. So saa zingine mtusamehe sio kupenda kwetu. If you tell them, by the way, I lost, for real I lost, they will not be there for you. They will not wait, but ukiwaambia hivyo, so na nyinyi wananchi, when we tell you kiliibiwa, msipigane. Tunaambia hivyo ndio msitoroke kwa kiu yetu.
Thank you. There is many times, sisi kama, like young people, many times most of us are in that hustling stage. And wanasemanga ukitaka kumake it lazima ukimbizane na DCI. Like it's not so easy. It's not easy to make it as a young person. And sometimes it doesn't involve like doing illegal business, or you can just be doing a legit business. For instance, ukienda tao, these people who's not necessarily hawkers, who's a mitumba on the street and daka kidogo amekimbia na change yako, and you know such things. So what are the strategies that we as young people can just employ, and also maybe in collaborative with the judiciary, that we can just do our businesses peacefully and safely without getting into such commotion and brushing shoulders with the law enforcers?
Thank you very much for those questions. We'll pass it back on to our speakers. As they answer it, maybe they can explain to us why, as young people, we are more interested in maandamanos and demonstrations rather than going to the streets of the corridors of courts. So kindly, as we wind up.
All right, so allow me to answer her question first. And that's mainly because, one, I don't think the judiciary is much involved in some of those procedures as is the county government itself. So then if there are matters to do with business permits and compliance affairs, that has to do with the county itself. So then I'd say comply. Hapo siko sure there's any other shortcut, in all honesty. Otherwise, ni kutoka teke every other time. But getting back to your question as well on, so cons or pros and cons of the social media, I'd say the social media is a very interesting tool. But then again, it's a double-edged sword in the fact that it can work to our benefit and to our disadvantage at the same time. So you pick one, do you want to use it for the right things? But then again, even as you use it for the wrong things, if you choose to go that direction, you also need to be aware of the consequences that are attached to that, whether they are legal or otherwise. But then again, at the same time, some of these things, we usually say the social media does not forget. These things will catch up with you, and when you need a clean bill, you know, after you've used it for whatever wrong reasons, that's the time when some of those negative things pop up, and then they put you in a compromising situation. So you'd rather use it responsibly, one, but then again, not also to spread misinformation and disinformation. You know, use it wisely and responsibly, and then it will work for you better.
Okay, so in closing, to close the discussion for today, I think I'll start with you, Madam Diana. Probably, could you tell us in your last statements, do you support maandamano? And if you don't support, if you were paid, if I gave you 10,000 shillings, I don't know your price, but 10,000 can be good money. If I gave you 10,000 shillings, would you go for it?
For maandamano, like basic, yeah, I would. Why not? It's fun. Okay, it's not even about fun. I think I would say, maandamano, or what's the English word for it? Yeah, protesting, I think it's also a way of expression. Yes, I think it's existed way even before us. And I think sometimes, when you rally with other people who are like-minded, you get to network, you get to exchange thoughts, and also you get to basically just speak up for something or a greater good that extends or supersedes you. So I don't think there's anything wrong with protesting, as long as it's peaceful protest, as long as you don't go damaging other people's stuff, then I think it's okay to, it's almost like a right to protest, to stand for something you believe in. So yeah, I stand for it, even without payment. I don't think anyone was paid for femicide, right? People still went, right? Yeah.
Okay, and lastly, to you, Madam Nthenya. Okay, fine. She said protesting is good, maandamano is good, but then I'm wondering if one day you are elected president, supposedly, you become the first Kenyan or East African female president, and your opponent on the other side is calling for maandamano. Would you support it? If you don't support it, what other remedies would you advise those young people to go and seek?
All right, so first, I think we already have the first East African president, female president, Madam Samia Suluhu.
She wasn't elected though.
She's still a president, is she not? Please. Yeah, so do I support maandamano, or would I support maandamano or protesting at that particular, from that level? I think in as much as one, it's yielding the kind of results that people are looking for, I'm not against it in any way. But if it's destructive, that might bring a problem. But before we can even get to the maandamano bit, I think I'd be more open to offering spaces where we can actually talk. Can we seek alternative solutions to whatever it is that's taking us to the streets, as opposed to, not even conversing before we can even get there. But unfortunately, most times that conversation doesn't usually yield much. So maandamano it is.
Sasa, you've heard it. Accept and move on. Kama utaki ku accept, you go to the streets and burn everything down. So with that,
No, do not misquote us, please. We said we are okay with maandamano, but only if it doesn't include destruction of property, personal property or even public property, yes.
Sasa, with that, I think you can give a round of applause to our wonderful panelists. Thank you.
Dance kishika unazungusha mguu right to the left unazungushia juu any dance majuu any dance majuu nilimwita hey kuja straight Kilimani msopa libambika nikisema yeni mali na hamna majika ni form tuna kill kidogo sakina ligenge imeti kwa bingine real kishika mic miti kuna bosi yo free to kuna breeze wanakwanga wameti wakijita wasanii wanakwanga wameti wakijita wasanii na manzi ako daily insta snapchat ali kama kaitisha juu kuna time nilidate in sisters wanana lakini misi daiti flow kiwa mavitu ni ngumu kuotofautisha wote wa Somali Halima na Hadija unapimanisha kitumiwa mapicha but kitu real surese kuchanganyisha napigia Shakilo kidansa la donjo ni dansa majuu dance kishika unazungusha mguu right to the left unazungushia juu any dance majuu any dance majuu ati dance kudonjo ni dance majuu dance kishika unazungusha mguu right to the left unazungushia juu dance majuu dance majuu
nasaka formula nisonge wapi nende wapi ndo ni get mula jokina jerima siwa mbona nitafuta na vile sherehe tulipiga jana ikalipuka akiwa line nilijipatanga stage na kwenye mfuko ninachwani nyuma mbele na kila saa ati safari si twende sitaki kumari nitajimada na madenge kwanza kidogo nina fever nichilkijani nikijimada na FIFA wesikuma mimi nitacheza na mafiga kwenye kuna isongeza volume kwenye speaker magina niko bukla na cheki tu mabundanda na niko maganji matladi ni za Ulaya mimi niko ready ni wapi tunakutana tukazitoke na machaji zikitubamba
dance kudonjo ni dance majuu dance kishika unazungusha mguu right to the left unazungushia juu any dance majuu any dance majuu ati dance kudonjo ni dance majuu dance kishika unazungusha mguu right to the left unazungushia juu any dance majuu any dance majuu
One more. Sweetie. No one has refused to dance, eh? Just a little bit. Hey. Thank you so much to